May the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. We would like to start, please. We would like to thank you all for coming. So we'd like to start the seminar, which is going to be the last public seminar of this forum, the annual Palestine Forum. I would like to extend my thanks to everybody in this session, which is going to be the final session, and this meeting that happens at a very critical time for the Palestinian cause, and also in light of the genocide that is exercised by the Israelis in Gaza. I would like to thank the Arab Center for the efforts exerted and for convening this event, which is an incubator for ideas and thought at a very critical time. Everybody was in need, in actual fact, to have such an incubation where we would share ideas, analyses, and also to learn a great deal from each other. I would like to extend my thanks to the Arab Center for Research, and I also would like to thank the Institute for Palestine Studies, where we've been able to talk about our plights, suffering, and also to see if there are any possibilities or specks of hope. This is the Nakba of our generation, a Nakba that I never expected that I would live. And I think many of you would share the same feeling with me. So this is going to be the final session of today of the conference that is going to talk about Gaza once again. And this is a topic that is in the mind of each one of us. So we're talking about this dead end. And this is the difficulty that all of us are facing. And this is the thorny issue that the Gazans are facing for more than 2 decades. And that is why this is a dilemma that we have to try to translate politically, and also not only in terms of slogans. And in order to discuss this topic and the challenges and prospects, we're going to have 4 Rifaq and 4 political activists and analysts that are going to be with us here, and I'm going to very simply try to introduce them because they are very much known to you all. So at the outset, I would like to give the floor to Brother Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, the Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative, and a person that has constantly been steadfast on the land of Palestine. We have also Adeeb Ziadeh from Qatar University, and also he is also from the British Academy for Higher Education. We have with us also Ahmed Ghoneim, who is an author and also a novelist, and who was a member of the first Intifada leadership. And we're going to conclude with Mr. Mueen Al-Taher, who is an author, and also he is a coordinator from the Center for Policy Studies. Would like to give the floor to Dr. Mustafa, and we kindly ask you to take 15 minutes. I'm going to be very strict. I know this is a very important topic, but we would like to give the opportunity also to the brothers and sisters present with us to pose questions as well. Go ahead, Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. Thank you very much. I would like to extend my thanks to the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies and the Institute for Palestine Studies for organizing this very important event. We have seen a large participation throughout the days of this event, and this is something that shows that we're going to have so much youth who are going to, we have seen a lot of research that is very much advanced. So would like to talk about the national project, the Palestinian project. This is a very important and sensitive topic, one of the most important topics, and there is a need to revive this project. This need is not a new one. It was present even prior to the aggression on Gaza, but it has become much more dire and necessary after the war that had proven the failure of the previous pathway that was undertaken by the official leadership. So this failure, what led to this aggression. So the national project should have three components. We should have the national objectives and goals, and also the strategy that would enable us to achieve the different goals and objectives, and also the mechanisms for the national movement that would transform the strategy into acts on the ground. When we talk about goals, so the question that is posed, why do we need a new project? And the answer to this question is that the PLO, the official representative of the Palestinian people, has let go of the projects, and they have undertaken what is called the two-state solution, which is to have an independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders, and also to have an agreed upon, and I underline agreed upon, solution for the refugees, and to make the Palestinian cause a cause of equality when it comes to civil rights. And this was built on two myths that have shown to be unfounded before and during the battle in Gaza. So the first myth is the possibility of reaching a consensus with the Zionists. And the second one is that the United States of America can be a guarantor and a mediator for any solution. In my view, is that Israel and the Zionist movement have put an end to this delusion or two delusions and any paradigm for a two-state solution for the following reasons. First of all, so the Oslo agreement or accord failed. Israel has refused in principle the establishment of a state, and not only from the part of Netanyahu, but the whole establishment. They declined any idea of a state, a sovereign state, and they continued with the Judaization process and also the settlement process. And the most difficult and gross mistake that was committed is the signing of the Oslo. And after that, they have limited the self-determination in historical Palestine only for the Jews. And we have seen a very violent trend, the trend of the Jewish supremacy. And this had led to many manifestations that have shown in the aggression towards fascism, that was moving towards fascism. And also Israel expressed itself and also made sure that it dealt with the most important challenge to the Zionist theory, which is the demographic makeup through settlement, and also they also establish an apartheid system that is the worst in its kind, historically speaking. And the third point that was proven by the aggression on Gaza, which is the implementation of genocide and ethnic cleansing. And in my view, is that the Zionist movement did not stop at any time from its endeavor to carry out ethnic cleansing in order to solve the problem of the geographical and also the demographic makeup, and that is why they were able to carry out the same Nakba that that took place in 1948. What became very clear in the memory of the Palestinians is that to have the Palestinian cause come to the forefront as a case of resistance. And this is something that, of course, the objective of the Jews that has started since the 19th century and that came after the Balfour promise and afterwards. And because I do not have enough time, I'm going to be very brief. And that is why we should not only aim to end the occupation, but also to stop the apartheid racist system in all historical Palestine in a way that would guarantee the return of the Palestinian refugees to their lands and cities, and also to establish a real democratic system whereby the Palestinians would be able to achieve their civil and national rights and also self-determination, and where the citizens will be equal in terms of rights and duties. This will not be achieved if we bet on internal Israeli dynamisms. No, we need to have a kind of a diverse resistance in order to change the balance of power. In addition to that, through the resoluteness of a strong resoluteness of the Palestinians on the ground that would defeat plans that Israel wants to exercise when it comes to ethnic cleansing, and also to defeat the occupation system through imposition of sanctions, as it was the case during the apartheid that used to take place in South Africa. This is something that is worthy of discussion in Palestine, because we do not want to keep on living in historical and old delusions. As for the strategy that should be adopted in order to change the balance of power, I think that this strategy, very briefly, should be based on three principles and should include six components. The principles that have been underlined by the Gaza battle are first to rely, self-reliance and also self-organization. And when I talk about self-organization, this applies to the strive, to the media, to the economy. What had been achieved by the Palestinians within this battle was closely linked to two things: self-reliance and also the great capabilities that are unprecedented when it comes to the organization that was very accurate and scientific. And the third principle is to defy the Zionist colonial system imposed by the Zionists. And also, the other pillars are six, and the most important component is this one before any others, to support the resoluteness of the Palestinians and to support their presence in Palestine, and also to reinforce the demographic resistance of the Palestinians, and also to adopt all forms of resistance, and also to unify the national ranks of the people in Palestine, and to have a unified leadership, and also to achieve complementarity when it comes to the strife between the components of the Palestinians inside, outside, and the occupied territories, and also to reinforce the BDS on the Israeli system, and sixthly, and also to try to infiltrate the ranks of the adversary, and also to build a movement of solidarity with the Palestinian people that would build on what had been achieved on this global revolution that is loyal to the Palestinian people. And last, the most difficult part is the mechanisms required in order for us to be able to achieve that. It is not possible for a national liberation movement to be successful without a unified national leadership and front. And if the division had prevailed for some time, the reasons of such division have evaporated now. The first reason was the disparity and differences when it comes to the settlement and the Oslo Accord, and this failed. There is no reason for any of those to defend this project. And if the difference or disagreement is about power, there is no authority, because the authority has become an authority with no authority, an authority which is under occupation, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank. In light of this battle, Israel did not only try to reoccupy Gaza, but also the West Bank with all its components. That is why it is necessary to know that for us to be able, it is very important to endorse and to underline that there is a huge crisis that Palestine and the political system faces, and that it had proven to be a failure vis-à-vis the challenges that have come to the surface. And this crisis is due to so many reasons. First, the failure of the program and the political project, which is Oslo, and we have talked about that. Secondly, the continuation of the internal divisions and the continuation of the inoperative efforts of reconciliation. And also lack of internal democracy when it comes to the different institutions of the PA or PLO, and also failure to crystallize mechanisms of national partnership, whether at the level of national strife or the management of the political operations or the authority, or to reform the PLO. So the Palestinians as a whole, inside Palestine and outside, are much more advanced than the official leadership, and the strife on the ground is much more advanced compared to the government. And there is a gap, a deep yawning gap between this leadership and the different factions and the public, particularly the young generations of the Palestinians who feel marginalized and excluded at a time where we see increasing conspiracies in order to circumvent the project of the Palestinian. This dilemma requires two main things. First, the protection of the right of the Palestinian people to represent themselves. This is a central matter, and the Palestinian people, and they are now subjected to many attempts to have interventions, infiltration from different parts, from the United States of America, Israel. Everybody is interfering in this matter. The protection of the right of Palestinians to represent themselves is a pivotal thing, and how to unify the ranks of the Palestinian people and their strife, and also territorial unity and the territories. Linking these two components together can only be solved through a unified national leadership that would have all the components under the PLO, if we would like to preserve this framework as a representative framework on the following basis: to have a national resistance program to the Zionist project and not adaptive to it, and also to build a democratic system on the basis of democratic partnership, and to reject the hegemony of others, and also to have democratic elections that would include all Palestinians, not only Palestinians inside Palestine, also those who are outside Palestine. This is the right to each and every citizen, and also to make sure to implement all these objectives and to build a pressure group, popular pressure groups. Without those popular pressure groups that are effective, we cannot reach these objectives. And at the end, this is something that is very important, something that we have learned from the experience that we had in the last 4 months. It is necessary to rebuild Palestinian relations with the different Arab and international liberation groups based on this revolution that is in solidarity with the Palestinians and that is against the aggression that had been exercised on Gaza. So I've come to the end of my time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa. Thank you for being committed to the time that was allocated to you. We'd like to give the floor now to Dr. Ghoneim. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, good evening to you all. So I have prepared my papers and I have left them. And I have left to the hearts of people who love their homeland to lead my mind within these rubbles that we see in Jabalia and Khan Yunis, and within the political rubbles of such a political regime, perhaps which is the more dangerous than any other rubbles that we are facing on the ground there. So I leave to this heart and to the hearts of you all to be able to see the reality before you that many people try not to make us not see. Why don't we talk about a national project after the 7th of October? So what does the 7th of October mean? What are the meanings that have been exposed and revealed after the 7th of October? How can we build on what had happened on the 7th of October? All this aggression, all this war, all this destruction is either in order to make or to dissipate the outcomes of the 7th of October. We're talking about the first hours of the 7th October. Everything that has happened. And why? Because those hours, the first hours, have toppled the theory of national security, Israeli national security, the theory of national security that has continued throughout the Israeli history since Ben Gurion till date. This is a theory that was based on 3 pillars, irrespective of the details. There are so many details. We have the preemptive war, and also that there are 3 main pillars that we have to take into account and that have been toppled. So the first pillar is deterrence. So this state is no longer able to claim that its adversaries, its enemies, are deterred, or that this pillar is still present. That is why they have substituted deterrence with fear, with terror. If Hezbollah comes forward, they say, you're going to have the same fates and destiny of the Gazans. And if Iran moves forward to carry out any act, they tell them that you're going to have the same fate of the Gazans. So that is why deterrence was substituted with fear and terror. Lebanon has been subjected to so many attacks similar to the 7th of October and similar to the attacks that Gaza had been subjected to. The second pillar, which is the early warning. So they took them by chance. So the resistance groups, and I'm not talking about the Islamic creedal understanding of A'iddu, prepare to them, but those who understand the difference between Ista'iddu, be ready and prepare for them, that there is a necessity for a military doctrine for any military act. So the space has made their preparedness in the best form and shape. So it had made them able to be ready for any possibilities and options. And the third pillar, because I do not want to be lengthy, we're talking about the decisive and quick war, very decisive. 6 days, we're talking about the war. So what kind of war? So Israel wanted to have a very decisive and quick war. We're talking here about 130 days. Achieving the objectives and goals of the war is still not possible, whether the direct or the indirect goals are still not possible. Is it possible for a state who is not able to achieve its objectives in Gaza that has been under siege for 17 years? Can it be victorious as they have claimed on different fronts at the same time? For 20 years, they have been saying that they are preparing their army to be ready to have a fight, to fight on different fronts. So what do we want to see? So this is a theory in military science, but they cannot see it from Dien Bien Phu till date. They have been trying to ignore this theory. So the concept of balance of power, I do not criticize you, and you're my ally and my brother. I'm not criticizing you here. The concept of the balance of power has changed worldwide. And I'm talking about the concept of the balance of power, and I'm not talking about the components of the balance of power. What do we mean by the change of the concept of the balance of power? That means that we have entered into a new era. Great powers are no longer able to be decisive when they come their wars. So the United States of America has spent billions and billions, thousands of billions of dollars, and they have left with all those that they have brought as leaders to Iran. And after 20 years, they substituted Taliban with Taliban. Knowledge, science is in the hands of small countries. We are in the age of missiles, rockets, and drones. This is not something that is only particular to one great power or limited to one great power. So the concept of balance of power, so the more power in one side is not the decisive point in any battle. And this is no longer possible, not even for great powers to be decisive in their wars against a liberation movement. So the problem that those liberation movements face, before I talk about the national project, but I wanted to say we cannot make a national project. And I do not like this kind of wording. I'd like to talk about the cause, the Palestinian, national Palestinian cause, and also national liberation. What is important in all these things, in all what we have changed when it comes to the change of balance of power, it is not possible for a state that cannot be victorious to impose its political will on the whole region. They cannot do so. Even when they create an alliance of the fearful, they cannot achieve that. This is something that should be reckoned by the Arab regimes. And they should not accept the preconditions imposed by Israel. Those who cannot achieve victory cannot impose their will on the region. They do not have the will to be victorious. They have the will to take revenge, to destroy, in order to create a scene of terror. I know what the problem is when it comes to the liberation movement. It is the cost. It is the agony. It is the tears. The cost of war is very, very dear. But I would like to look in detail into this cost from Clausewitz till date. So the cost of war, when it comes to states, it is a cost which is within the limits of the feasibility calculations. Is it going to be a feasible war? Is it going to have geopolitical gains? Are there any interests that are going to be gained? It is a matter of options. But when it comes to the calculation of the cost of war, this is a fate. When it comes to the liberation movement, it is not an option. There is a generation that is going to pay a dear price, the price of this war. Because if you dissociate yourself from this cost as a liberation movement, that means that you're going to surrender to the occupation for it to stay on your territories. You have to force them. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be a cost. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be any cost. A strategic calculation when it comes to the management of the war, to the battle, but when it comes to the heavy cost, it is a matter that exists when it comes to the liberation movements, either to go ahead with this project or not to go ahead with it. And you have to be ready for this very dear and painful cost vis-a-vis a criminal Nazist enemy. I'm not underestimating the importance of calculations and preparations. No. Why do liberation movement, they choose long-term popular movements and what? Why are they happy to continue? Because these are the wars of the people. These are either long-term or short-term wars. And here lies the calculation of the cost. How am I going to go ahead or retreat. In this context, I do not want to go lengthy because of the time constraint. There are so many things that can be said here. I'm not here to lift your morals. No, I'm trying to put the facts on the table, to talk about the theories of the war of the people and the liberation movements vis-à-vis greater powers. What we need is not try to rebuild the Palestinian home. I do take place in this strife. I was crying yesterday after what I heard from the analysts about the reality in Gaza before reconstruction. Although reconstruction is very important, we need to rebuild the political system, which is under the rubbles. Agreements that have been to no avail. And this is an invitation, a call to the brothers in Hamas and Jihad and to the PLO. And I'm a member of Fatah movement also. This is not the time to talk about the number of seats, these small calculations, trivial calculations. The legitimacy of the homeland is much more important than the legitimacy of the rule. This is a very critical moment. This is an acid litmus test to be partners in the homeland, in the state. We can have a new national project. I do not want to be lengthy. If we have 5 components, we have to understand very deeply, because they want us to have a strategic change in the way we think about this national project. The first component, the unity of the people. Any national project that does not meet the unity of the people would not be described as such. The project in Gaza, a project in the West Bank, a project that would let go of the refugees. This is not a national project, so we have to unify the homeland and unify the people. Any project, those who think they can dissociate themselves from part of themselves, let's not interfere in matters taking place in Gaza for us to protect the West Bank. How can you do that? Are you able to protect the West Bank, which is being raided every single day? Can anybody do so? How can you dissociate yourself from part of yourself? The first thing, so the unity of the homeland and the unity of the people, number 3, and also the unity of the political regime. So, a regime. So what does it mean when you talk about a pluralism, when you see yourself as the one that should be the ruling power? Or when we talk about resistance, we talk about partners in decision making. But when it comes to ruling, we talk about pluralism and the ballot. We do not want to reinvent the wheel. When it comes to resistance, we are all resistance forces. When it comes to ruling, it is pluralism and what people want to have. And the legitimacy of the homeland is much more, or takes priority over the legitimacy of the ruling power. So there are functions. It is not possible to continue as we used to be prior to the 7th of October. The different sacrifices that have been made. These are the sacrifices of the people of Palestine. We have to rise to this level, and we have to create one political system or regime. Number 4, the unity, to try to unify the strategies. We cannot have different strategies that are contradictory to each other or against each other. We have to have unity in national strategy. We have to have a unified national strategy. I'm not saying on what basis, because I do not accept for Hamas or Jihad to come to the PLO on the basis of the commitments of the PLO. These commitments restrict the Palestinian people and the energies of the Palestinian people, and liberation cannot happen if the compact that we have is going to continue with this frenemy kind of concept. This what was the case after Oslo. That is why it is our duty, it is that duty to all those who have resorted to this agreement. have to do something. We have to have a strategic vision, a vision that can deal with the three components that preceded them: the unity of the people, the unity of the cause, and the unity of the homeland. And the last component, the right of the Palestinian people for resistance. Many say if you do not achieve in this your what you want to achieve, you would not be able to achieve anything after 20 years. These sacrifices should not be to no avail. Since you started talking and talking about a Nakba, and I do not want to see situation as such, and I do not want the people to see it as such, irrespective of all the suffering, these bloods are a call to us, and they push us to achieve the national independence project. We have never been closer to independence as we are today. But it is not something that would happen like that. No. We need to have a very valorous decision from Abu Mazen, the president. We cannot run away from the unity of the state. We need to have a courageous decision to be undertaken by Hamas. And we cannot resort to the will of individuals. The people, the homeland is beyond all individuals. All factions have entered into the era of post factions. Last word, if you allow me. The Palestinian resistance is now breathing from a military perspective. So that is why, irrespective of the limited energies that might arise, so the responsibility here on the leadership of the PLO, the president, and all components of the Palestinian community to create this component, because we would like to complete all what is required, because they want to stifle resistance, because this is the lung that should be preserved, and we're going to lose ourselves for a decade or two. Now it is the time to harvest. It is now the time for us to be able to harvest, and it is not possible to transform this military resoluteness unless we do so. There are people who think, and I do understand why they do so, either to be in the Palestinian resistance, facing a crisis of existence, or to impose our existence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Thank you, of course, to our colleagues at the Arab Center and Institute for Palestine Studies. This is the second round of the annual Palestine Forum, and I've met wonderful people from all over the world. I've never known any other forum like this where people meet for 3 days under the same roof discussing their national affairs. And I wish that this experience can be applied to all the crises, like our brothers in Syria, Yemen, and others, to have similar forums so that we can have an Arab Islamist voice for this region. Talking about the national project, I agree with the two previous speakers, and specifically, if we try to answer what has the 7th of October achieved, this prepares the ground for a follow-up question, and that is, how can we turn the 7th of October into a catalyst for the national Palestinian national project? I don't want to get into the uh, debate on if there is a national project or not. There is a minimum that Hamas agreed on, and this is now present in Hamas's documents. So we're talking about the minimum to achieve that. So how can we make the 7th of October a catalyst for that? At the Palestinian level, the previous panelists alluded to that. I'd just like to add that the 7th of October restored our self confidence as Palestinians. Now we are able to, to break Israel's belligerence and to hinder its growth and to break its prestige and give Israel a taste of its own medicine. What Israel has been doing to us for the last 75 years. It's true, the blow wasn't decisive or fatal, but it's painful nonetheless. That's why we can call the 7th of October the blow of the century or the strike of the century. We as Palestinians now are able to uh, hinder their attempts to wipe us out from the regional agenda. You all remember where we were and where the Palestinian cause were before the 7th of October when Netanyahu stood before the United Nations bragging, holding out a map showing the entire land of Palestine as part of Israel. Now, definitely, we managed to cut off the road to achieve normalization away from our national rights. We as Palestinians managed to do that. And I may add that regarding the prevailing interpretation before the 7th of October, I always tended to disagree with that. They used to explain the Palestinian division as a struggle over power. The 7th of October has destroyed, has blown up this myth. It is not a struggle over power. If it was, then people in Gaza would have accepted Blair's proposals when he gave them and the airport, the seaport, and others in return for some acceptance of the quartet's conditions. They would have accepted Kushner's proposals, who offered them billions of dollars, and he offered them something which was similar to a Palestinian state because the deal of the century was rejected in Ramallah. The struggle was not over power, but it was a difference over the national project. I said this before and I repeat it now that the Palestinian division, if it wasn't over the national project, it wouldn't have been. Oslo destroyed us, Oslo ripped us into pieces and cost us many, many years of our national struggle. So, therefore, the struggle over Oslo and the difference over Oslo, we just heard that Oslo is no longer in existence. No, some are still convinced that Oslo is there, it's present. The, the the PLO are officially still clinging to the hope that the Israeli government would give them something and accept the two-state solution. And there are still convictions that successive American administrations would do that. They do not realize that 30 years of successive American administrations denied that. Banking on an American administration is banking on a mirage. Yesterday, in one of the sessions, there was talk about the Palestinian situation in 1948, and they tried to explain what does the 7th of October mean to Israel. What I want to say is, how can we make the 7th of October a catalyst for our Palestinian national project, and how once the guns are silent in this war, we can transfer these rivers of blood and sacrifices into a real national achievement. I try to respond to this question by saying that we have to deal with the fundamental players in the Palestinian national project and what are the points of weakness, strength, and challenges and opportunities. The Palestinian players are Palestinians, of course, starting with the PLO. Ladies and gentlemen, the PLO, uh, its leadership, we even in the days of the late Yasser Arafat, we used to discuss that decisions are taken by one person. We said then and we say now that the PLO should operate on the principle of power sharing, and at that time there was Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat, when he was put on the historical juncture, he chose the right path and paid with that with his life. Those who succeeded him are programmed fundamentally, emotionally, intellectually, that the project they are following is the right one and everything else is wrong. For this reason, this man has chosen to go it alone. The size of destruction caused by Abu Mazen and the 40, you know what, they are not 40, they are 5 in fact. The damage they caused, this man caused Abu Mazen and the people surrounding him in the Palestinian scene, left the West Bank in the middle of a war, the war on Gaza, and with all the bloodshed, he just left it sitting idly and watching as a spectator. Not only that, he issued orders not to allow for any interviews, give statements, anything. Even Abbas Zaki spoke before the Mayadeen channel and praised the Tufan al-Aqsa. There was an official statement saying does not represent the official position of the PA, and this position continued until some 60 or 70 days. In these 60 or 70 days, there was not even any communication with a member of the Palestinian leadership, did not even bother to contact those who are leading the struggle in Gaza. Imagine an authority which claims that it's the only legitimate representative of the people and the leaders of the people. They did not even bother to get in touch and say, at least our hearts are with you, we support you, we empathize with you, at least. And as Al-Habbash said, that nobody came to us in the Muqata'a, in the headquarters of the PA, and we didn't say to him that we are against this war of Al-Aqsa. And this has been done also at the level of embassies. Not only that, but what was said was even more than that. What should happen in Gaza? So much so that the West Bank now, the people of Gaza are crying out. They were sort of hoping that there should be some sort of opposition, some sort of an agitation in the West Bank. There was nothing of the sort in the West Bank. Why? Simply because the Palestinian national feelings were bulldozed in the last 20 years, because the mentality of the PA security apparatus, we are here. I think all of us are of an academic background, and we have to be frank with each other. The fighting doctrine of the Palestinian security forces was not directed at Israel or the occupation, but to chase and clamp down on the resistance and any money or weapons which goes to the resistance. They clamped down on the money, on the weapons. That's when we wanted the money and the weapons to rise up in defense of Gaza, we couldn't find it because people who had it disappeared. At the personal level, I can say something, but our colleagues in the Fatah movement, they know we have weapons in the West Bank. I live in the Qalandia refugee camp. When there was a quarrel between two families, tens of people would come out, each firing their AK-47 rifles. People used to roam the streets carrying, displaying weapons under the protection. In Hebron, when the Waw and Al-Ja'bari families had a dispute, we saw so much weapons, the likes of which we haven't seen before. 1 minute. What do you mean 1 minute? No, no. Okay. Uh, I'm not considered that I belong to any movement or faction, but from the point of view of an observer for the last 17 years, I bear witness from an academic standpoint and a political standpoint that Hamas movement went to the the end of the line in reconciliation, to the extent that in 2020 there was almost a division amongst its ranks because there was an agreement between Jibril al-Jub, representative of Fatah, and the Hamas leadership, and they even accepted that Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen will be the joint nominee for president for both Hamas and the Fatah. Imagine, despite that, Hamas gave this huge compromise, and they went further than anybody to find a solution. But when it came to the elections, Mahmoud Abbas took out his pen and he said, cancel everything out. You know, hundreds of Hamas activists were being active in the elections, ended up in prison. If you give me a minute or two. The Arab regional factor, they're either complicits, they are conspirators, or unable to do anything. The international element is, well, we know it's the international community or here is led by the United States, and we can never rely on that. We saw Biden in 3 years, everywhere he did something except for the Palestinian cause. Now they are thinking that there can be different patterns, different forms of a Palestinian state. So now they started thinking details. As for the opportunities, we have a very ferocious resistance. They prepare to continue in the state of resistance for a long time. And the news from there said, despite all the bombardment in Gaza, they say, don't fear for us. Our backs our future lies in our popular support. Just look after the people, leave us to do the fighting. And the support and the sympathy in the world was unprecedented now. inside Palestine, we everybody knows what we think of Abu Mazen. The risks now, the continuation of the siege and the control over Gaza, this is a challenge. And the Palestinian decision remaining in the hands of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves, this will be a problem, frankly speaking. There will not be real national reconciliation without a change in leadership, um, and the forceful expulsion is a threat. Agreeing on one unified vision is. I agree with Dr. Mustafa and Mr. Ahmed. It's necessary to have Palestinian unity, not on the basis of the current leadership, but we should have a temporary leadership, temporary Palestinian Authority to stop the security coordination with Israel. Thank you. Mr. Mueen Al-Taher. Thank you. First of all, I apologize for being unable to speak from the podium because I don't want to get over enthusiastic. And secondly, I have an old wound which is being now even more painful with the wounds of our people in Gaza. So please allow me to speak from this position, sitting down. Although all the discussion is on the Palestinian National Project and how it will be impacted by the 7th of October events, but I think it's good from the start we should agree that any Palestinian National Project should be approved by the people. Dr. Mustafa talked about aspects and Mr. Ahmed about the general vision for a project that we should struggle to achieve, and that is the liberation of Palestine and other secondary objectives like the right of return and what tactics we should or the central circle we should rely on to achieve the main objective. Since the Nakba of 1948, we are aiming to liberate Palestine. This was part of many military coups in the Arab countries who stated that as their objective. And then there was the pan-Arabist visions, and there were some attempts limited by the Khalil al-Wazir and those Mustafa Hafiz, the Syrian reconnaissance unit. But all of this has finished after the 1956 war. Then the PLO, when it was founded in 1964, built a strategy on rallying the energies of the Palestinian people in aid of the Arab army's strategy to liberate Palestine. But then, when the PLO launched its own military liberation campaign, the central circle of that has disappeared, and then the popular struggle to liberate Palestine was chosen. Then after that, in the 70s, there was a debate in Palestine, and the 10-point program was adopted, which was described as a program based on fighting, and any piece of land liberated will be this system will be established there as a nucleus for the war. Then in the October War in 1973, I remember we were young when we were discussing with Palestinian leaders. They used to say to us, how do you know that we only insist on the West Bank? Maybe we can liberate the Galil area first. Then there was a period where assassinations took place against the first line leaders, and then concessions were given until we got to the Oslo period, and the inability of the Palestinian national movement to move from a limited self-rule to liberation. This led to a political division, which led eventually to a geographical division, and all attempts at the national reconciliation ended in failure because of the differences in what is meant by the national project is. So therefore we need a unified vision, a unified national project which maintains the historical narrative and restores the historical rights of the Palestinian people, and we agree on the means of struggle. Undoubtedly, the Tufan al-Aqsa on the 7th of October, and I think there were two miracles there. The first miracle was on the 7th of October, and the second was this unbelievable resistance which is still continuing. I think it will be perpetuated to finally become an even bigger miracle than the 7th of October. Now, this event has proven that there's not much use in changing the essence of struggle to projects to improve the living standards of Palestinians or to circumvent the Palestinian cause through official normalization between some Arab countries and Israel and make it an alternative to finding a solution and turn the land for peace slogan into security for Palestinians and the Israelis. This means rehabilitating the Palestinians to be ready to accept this kind of peace, and this of course will depend on the outcomes of negotiations which are conducted under an imbalance of power. This is what's happened since the Oslo Accords, and we're still going around chasing our tails for no outcome at all. By the way, the two-state solution was never present in the Palestinian literature. There was the establishment of a Palestinian state. The first time this term was used was by Bill Clinton, and since it's been used in the political literature in the Arab world, in Palestine, and at the international level, and it becomes a preamble to any statement without taking any steps to force the Israelis to withdraw to the borderlines of the 4th of June 1967, and all what it aims at now is to turn the Palestinian lands into small cantons. This is a big illusion which is aimed at enabling Israel to continue its occupation. There is no discussion, no debate over the Palestinian people establishing their free state. History teaches us that there are no negotiations on the principle of independence. No, but always the negotiations are on the timeline for that. This has not happened. And also, we must aim also at stopping and furthering the Palestinian division because of the delusions of a two-state solution. But we can agree on how to deal with this new interest shown by the West, despite the fact that I'm convinced that it's impossible to achieve this, because that requires first to freeze settlements first, and then to have a timeline to dismantle all these settlements. Of course, this is not possible, but to avoid any return to the same vicious circle of the Oslo agreements or the conditions of the quartet, or calling for an international conference like President Mahmoud Abbas has been calling for. After that, the Palestinian people can decide the shape of the state they want. The 7th of October had opportunities, but at the same time it entailed the threat of liquidating the Palestinian cause, and this can happen through the circumvention of getting rid of the military achievements by turning them into political failures. This is what happened in the 1973 war. We Arabs are used to that, and this is constituted in the shape of talking about Gaza after the war, or establishing a new governance, and also trying to reinstitute the normalization process after it was destroyed by the 7th of October. I'm talking about rejuvenating the Palestinian Authority, which means even more concessions, and turn it into a state of complete submission to the Israeli security apparatus. Of course, the collusion between the official Arab order and we are also talking about defeating the occupation, a main objective. This project is based on the fact that the PLO is the political entity which is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, but this is subject to rejuvenating the Palestinian national movement. The idea is not to make Hamas join the PLO. The idea is to take the PLO out of the morgue it's lying in, into a new organization which is no longer under the control of the PA, and its leadership are elected through elections or through consensus if that is impossible. And we should not allow any Palestinian side to be subjugated to the Israeli control, and we should also work on a temporary leadership until the Palestinian National Council is re-established through the appointment of Palestinian figures who are known for their record, and also to go beyond the tactics of the struggle and placing one as a priority over the others. Now is we should not allow that the victim is required to find solutions for the perpetrator of the crimes. We should also maintain the unity of the Palestinian people wherever they are. In the past, in the history of the Palestinian national movement, there was always focus on a central goal, like armed struggle or armed resistance. I think this equation should change now because of the change of the general conditions. So therefore, we may see multiple central circles all occurring at the same time. Maybe more than one can be present or may be led by one central circle leading the struggle in one phase, like struggle against the apartheid, development, economy, education, etc., etc. The final point that I will close with, I don't think we can establish a Palestinian national project without re-establishing the democratic trend which was represented by Fatah and other national factions. Unfortunately, this trend was weakened a lot. I think the re-establishment of this trend will be alongside the resistance movements a pillar upon which we can say we have a national project, a national Palestinian project. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mueen. Thank you for respecting the time. I was looking at your watch. I'm sure there will be many questions now, but I want to just focus that the summary of what was said, that the importance of reviving the PLO, maybe the re-establishment of a democratic trend. We'll take some questions from each side of the room. Thank you. No. Please, 2 minutes, otherwise I'll cut you off. 3 minutes will be too. Please, state your name. Hussama bin Nasser. What Mr. Adeeb said, I thank all the panelists. We know each other and we took part in many actions. What Mr. Adeeb has said, if 80% of what he said, it should not be said in an academic conference. I'm talking about a systematic thing, a national project. What you heard is part and parcel of the slang, the matches, singing matches between each side. Dr. Mustafa spoke about solutions and their criticism accepted. But I tell you, I'm from Fatah. I'm from Fatah. When the president issued the decree of elections, then he said, well, Jerusalem is not Jerusalem. We were surprised that a Shah party said, we agree with postponing the elections, and then the Democratic Front. So even the left have a front, and they let us down. So if, please get to the point of your question. Now we had a coalition, Democratic Coalition, Popular Front, the Democratic Front, and others. The second day after forming this alliance, we found that FIDA and Ashab joined the government. So just to blame Fatah on its own, Fatah, the authority, which has the power, I mean. Secondly, for Hamas and Islamic Jihad, For example, I'm against them joining the PLO because we are broke. What would they get out of it? We want a national alliance. Thank you. Please, a question only. We wanted a question. So it's all the fault of a Shah party after all. Can the speaker use the microphone, please? I want to ask Dr. Mustafa one question. Is there any project for the settlers to start their own state in the West Bank and chase the PA out? Thank you. I have a follow-up comment. Is any talk of the Palestinian National Project? This will not happen before we get rid of Oslo agreements and liquidate all its legacy. Anything apart from that, we will be going around in a vicious circle. Thank you very much. Now, the obstacle is now we're dealing with a PA, which is a tool of the occupation, and it provides services free of charge. How can you get into any alliance with an authority which is providing these services? Mr. Ziadeh, I thank you. We really need this frankness. You talked about Taliban and the Islamic resistance. Who is providing the sacrifices? The Palestinian cause is a Palestinian cause first, and an Arab cause, and an Islamic cause. These heroic actions are really the result of the Islamic upbringing, the upbringing of mosques and a religious upbringing. They don't deny others, but the others should not deny their sacrifices too. Thank you very much. My name is Jihan. I was from Al-Arabi. All what you said is very nice and very convincing, good analysis. I want to understand on what rules, on what basis. Mr. Adeeb said the PA is standing idly. No, they're not. We're talking about the security forces who go and dismantle any bomb that the resistance fighters want to prepare for the Israeli occupying forces when they attack them. The PA and its security apparatus act as free security company which provides services to Israel free of charge. How can we talk about a joint leadership and all these academic and theoretical solutions which sound right, but in reality, for as long as Oslo is there, and this is the security mentality and doctrine Oslo is based on, we're either in the same trench, resisting and fighting, or writing this academic. Okay, we have to translate this into a reality. A couple more questions and we take a round of answers. And thank you. Thank you. A quick observation. I was hoping to hear a bit more. On the 7th of October, the I think the value system that the West has been talking to us about for decades has collapsed. They gave us a headache telling us about the freedom of expression, human rights, etc. All of this was exposed completely. Even the international organizations. Look at what happened to the UNRWA. Some accusations level at a dozen of its staff. All the money is stopped. This is something unprecedented in recent history. اسمه جهان حسني. I'm a journalist based in Washington. The administration now is floating the idea of a Palestinian state according to Israeli standards. But what I've noticed in what the administration is saying, now they're saying that the Palestinian state should include Gaza and the West Bank. If this is the case, why don't they say that when the reconstruction takes place, why not part of the population of Gaza go to the West Bank? Why, if we're talking about one Palestinian state, why don't we take them to the West Bank? Last question for this round, then we take a round of answers. Thank you. My name is Hassan Mlehat. My name is Hassan Mlehat. I am a student of law and a political analyst. I want to ask a direct political question. Without the genocide we see and witness, and everybody can see that, and compare that to what's happening in the West Bank and all the incursions and attacks, and with the background of this weakness in the Arab system, and which was apparent after the 7th of October. There are central powers in the world which control our fate as Palestinians. Now they want a rejuvenated Palestinian Authority, which means more in serving Israel more. My question is, how can protect the achievements of what happened on the 7th of October as a step towards achieving our national vision? I understand the over-enthusiasm because of the importance of this forum. I just want to talk about the Palestinian Authority because they talk about it in terms of a tool of the occupation. Undoubtedly, also a code has been cancelled. The Israelis themselves disregarded it. We should say that this agreement is no longer in existence. So far as the PA is concerned, and at the personal level, I have no doubt that that President Abbas will change his position. We are into the 130th day of the war. If he didn't wake up on the first day, he would have woken up on the second, third, fifth week, second month, third month. I don't know. Maybe they're promising him that just wait a couple of weeks, then we will finish off what happened in Gaza and we will send you there to rule. The Israelis cannot do that, and the Americans are beautifying Israeli failures. They're talking about reforming the Palestinian Authority, fighting corruption, rejuvenating. The occupation is responsible for all of that. If the occupation ends, then all of these problems will disappear. I think Abu Mazen is faced with the same situation that Yasser Arafat has faced, of course, notwithstanding all the differences between the two men. But if we want to talk seriously, Dr. Azmi, in his opening lecture, said the PA is on a historical juncture. The PA authority now is threatened by the Israeli position, and they are threatened in the West Bank because settlers want to get rid of it and establish their own step. They should move. They should either take a step forward or even give more concessions than what already has to become worse than Antoine Lahd in the South Lebanon, or go to Gaza on an Israeli tank, although the Israelis are not even prepared to give him a tank to climb over it to go to Gaza to rule. So if we want to speak in political terms, we should say something which can be achievable. There is no hope. According to the latest opinion polls, that Hamas in the West Bank was achieving 95%, and we must watch this closely to take the proper decisions. Thank you. I want to draw your attention to what Dr. Azmi has said, and in all the discussions I noticed that it was not picked up as it should have. It's a very important. I'm not just being nice to the man. I just want to shed light on this. He talked about the role of the social players to impact change. Change by its nature is slow. In any case, when the social structures interact, the change in the social players change is planned and deliberate. It's based on a vision to achieve the objectives of this change. And what we see now, that we either continue accepting the status quo or move forward to change. We are speaking here with talk which is highly charged emotionally, enthusiastically, but there is a large number of academics, politicians. We have to decide. The national movement, which I am part of its leadership, has to decide either to be the subject of this change or be part of the leadership of the change. And this applies to all, from the top leadership to the rank and file. And in return, the Islamist movement and the resistance movement, in the same direction, they gave us all a lung to breathe through. We know before the war, the 7th October gave us all a lung to breathe. This lung will not be there for long unless we activate the social element, the social player. Social player here sometimes can be one individual, sometimes it's a group, sometimes it's a movement. I hope to see my brother Mueen Al-Barghouti soon released, and with his potential we can work together on the principle of resistance. We agree on the principle of resistance, and we know Oslo is dead, but they don't want to bury it. The, the, the corpse is there, nobody wants to bury it. We all agree that victory will not be achieved except through full resistance. Playing the blame game will not take us far. We, in order to lead the people, the Palestinian people, we should unite people and not divide them more. We want some hope to provide for people. We don't want people to continue on crying. A leadership which cannot provide hope for the people cannot lead. If the leader only wants to cry, then he has nothing more to offer. I don't like this engaging in a blame game, although I can master it when it's necessary. Really, I do not like also to tap on people's backs and praise them for no reason. We are all from an academic background, and we should try to diagnose carefully and to put our hand on the right place of the wound. Sometimes we are nice to each other. We are here in an academic gathering. We have to be frank. We have to, and this requires us to be so, because the amount of blood which is being shed in Gaza is too much for anybody, for any one of us not to be so. I Yes, it's true that we are not here to play the blame game, but I blame our brothers in Fatah, this great historical movement which gave a lot of sacrifices, fighters, martyrs, and still represents the potential it has. I come from a refugee camp. I know there are men, if their leadership calls upon them and does not surround them now and impose limits on them, they would rise up to defend their brothers in Gaza. What surprises me is why nobody challenges this current leadership of Fatah, which is imposing itself. How can we call the Fatah the National Council for Fatah or the PLO, and after 130 days of a war, they don't even bother to meet up, hold one meeting? Addressing the nationalistic leaders who reject Oslo. If there is not one man who can stand up and face up to the leader, yes, I know some can come to a conference and speak personally, but where is his voice when they should stand up to the leadership and say to them, where are you? Where are you going? How can we understand? In the Central Committee of Fatah, a meeting was called many times. The Central Committee calls for a meeting of the Central Committee, and the President doesn't allow any meetings. This is widely spread in the media. Is why should they meet? They have no reason to meet, they say. I call for all the people in Fatah to say to Abu Mazen, enough is enough. We want a new leadership. We cannot be going on forever with him monopolizing power. And for the Palestinian people, if we don't have leaders of pioneers of change, there will be no change, and specifically in the West Bank. I don't want to go beyond the academic context of this discussion, but maybe it's become necessary now. Very simply, we say what we're faced with now is a genocide. After all this fantastic heroism and sacrifices, we're talking about 105,000 Palestinians were martyred or injured. This has not happened. More than 4%, 4.5% of the Gazan population. If this was to be repeated in the United States, then this will amount to 12.5 million people in 4 months. But what has Gaza proven to us? Gaza has proven to us the opposite of the theory that they try to impose on us and feed our by saying that if you can't face up to oppression, given to it. No, we should not give in to it. Now we are seeing the end of a phase, a stage, and beginning a new one. We cannot return back to the past after all that has happened. Will be a criminal. We know if the ethnic cleansing in Gaza succeeds, then they'll all go where they'll move to the West Bank to do the same. I think all the people, all the leadership people, leaders should know this. Israel has failed in uprooting the resistance. They failed in imposing their control even in the areas they managed to enter. They failed even with the success of liberating two of their hostages. Our task now is to make the ethnic cleansing and forceful expulsion a failure. Yes, we were divided over Oslo. Oslo has also achieved the biggest division before the division between Fatah and Hamas, and also the PA is an obstacle to unity. I just want to tell you that when we met in Egypt in Al Alamein, what was the objections to unification? That the official PLO leadership had three conditions. First of all, recognizing international legitimacy. I do not agree with that. What does the international legitimacy mean? What happens in the Ukraine or what happens in Gaza? Okay, apply international law equally, we'll all be with you. Secondly, the forms of resistance. They insisted on popular resistance. The international law says that people under occupation have the right to use all means, including armed struggle, as long as they respect international law. Why should we give up this right? Thirdly, the commitments the PLO. Why has Israel fulfilled any of its obligations? Let us be frank and let us see where the problem lies. In my opinion, now we should move from talking about slogans to building a new reality, starting from the grassroots to impose change. The leadership which was there is no longer viable to stay. So therefore, we want real change. People want change. The opinion polls show that, and those who do not want to hold elections, They're frightened from the results. Whoever they are, let them hit. I don't want to take too much, but I'll respond to a couple of questions. Do you think the settlers have a project to establish their? No, the settlers want to annex the West Bank to Israel. This is what they want to continue the settler colonialist transfer project which started in 48. Some of us are deluding ourselves that they stopped and they signed the Oslo agreements. No, they have not. They're continuing in the West Bank and they're continuing that in Gaza. Just continuing talking about the past and the two-state solution is dislocated from reality. We are faced with a colonial settler transfer project we have to defeat. Without it, we can never get our freedom. Not only to abolish Oslo, abolish security cooperation, we should abolish the doctrine of security cooperation. Have we ever seen an example in history whereby people under occupation are asked to protect the occupier? And about the international community, not only the international Western community, the 57 Arab and Muslim countries together who met in Jeddah could not send one convoy of aid to Gaza? We must revisit these concepts. As for the American administration, they are not talking about a two-state solution. They want another mirage to mislead us as they have done for the last 30 days at the expense of our right as a Palestinian people. Thank you. I'll take 5 more questions only for the lack of time. I'm from Ramallah, اسمي سعد يونس. First of all, we would like to thank the Arab Center and the Institute for Palestine. We are one people united by resistance and divided by bargaining. Everything to do with Oslo is on bargaining, giving up our rights, differing on. I remember Shafiq al-Hut, the late Shafiq al-Hut. He said that if we avoided the second part, that is submission, and be brave enough, we would not be in the situation we're in now. My question to Dr. Mustafa, you nominated yourself for the presidency. If you were to win with this current makeup, what would you do? Ibrahim Khadra, I am a Palestinian journalist. Can we find a solution to a problem without proper diagnosis? Why don't we admit that Israel has succeeded in breaking the circle of protection for by acquiescence, and the Arab circle by collusion, and the international circle of protection by the price we are paying in Gaza? If the current PA leadership and other leaders, I think we'll be betraying these sacrifices. And what is the price that the return for the sacrifices in Gaza. We're running out of time. Two more questions, maybe. It's 7:30. I'm also grateful to the Arab Center and the Palestine Institute. A wonderful forum. I came searching an answer I couldn't find. I definitely agree and about the unification, ending division, national project, but I could not find on how to achieve partnership between Hamas and Fatah. When I said they go in two parallel directions, they'll never converge. How? Let's be frank. This question requires another forum. Okay, we want questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. What Dr. Mustafa said is important without details. Thank you. I'll be very brief. I thank all the speakers. I, 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 I thank Adeeb Ziadeh. Talking about the Palestinian state, this is nonsense. Where we can put in this group of islands, now we see our countries divided to, where can we put it, place it on the room? Secondly, there can never be a Palestinian national project when there is two parallel lines which can never meet, the line of resistance and the line of giving in and colluding with the Zionist occupation. Okay, we're talking about paradigms here. If this paradigm is not broken, which is prevalent now, there will not be a Palestinian project, national project. In the name of God, uh, first of all, I thank this forum. It's clear that people who attended know a lot about Palestine. You're talking about a national project. Why isn't there a representative of Hamas in this panel? Isn't there a Hamas academic? Please, just a question. We don't have time. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. My name is Isam al-Shafi. With all due respect for all of you, I thank you. I have many questions. The first question is the Palestinian National Project. Is this a Palestinian undertaking? Secondly, is the PA now redeemable, can be reformed? If it is, who can do that and with what tools? Also, we should reconstruct the PA completely. Okay. Okay, please. We can continue outside, but we have to finish 7:30. I want to give each panelist a couple of minutes to respond. I'm very sorry. Everybody wants to ask. Everybody wants to take. You can go outside after the session and continue, but we want to finish. We then Dr. Azmi wants to close the forum. I close by confirming the idea that our national project, if we wanted the 7th of October to be a catalyst for this project, there should be real change at the leadership level of the PLO, and this needs the efforts, frank efforts, strong pressures from within the grassroots, the Fatah movements, the grassroots of Fatah in the West Bank. And this change will necessarily lead to a necessary temporary Palestinian leadership. If we wanted the 7th of October to achieve anything, we have to have a temporary transitional leadership with a transitional national council. They can come up with a vision and separate between what the PLO and any Palestinian authority on the ground. And I'm called from this platform to adopt what Dr. Azmi Bshara has said to be a manifesto for this forum, because it summarized the forum in half an hour, and the 3 days, the sessions in 3 days were an attempt to add flesh on the bone for this. I hope this can be achieved. And the final point, we have many opportunities and we are a fertile people. We have restored our self confidence. This self confidence should be translated into facts on the ground to create new facts on the ground, and we should not allow any manipulation at the Arab or international levels. Once again, Dr. Adeeb, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I wanted to invite you to listen to the high voices who are calling for a change in the. Don't you hear Jamal wearing the Janine? Don't you hear Mueen Al-Taher? Do you hear my voice? Don't you hear Khawla Al-Azraq? She is with us. She is the deputy of the president of the Revolutionary Council. I held a press conference a week ago in public. We spoke, we said enough is enough. So any reshaping of the role of the PA, I want you to be careful. I heard once Dr. Azmi saying the PA is not a football team we can change, and the PA cannot change its role. They are governed with limitations and controls that makes it unable to change. They have reached a dead end. They cannot change. So it should be reformed based on new references, new national references, and also even the question of reform. We are talking about the entity itself, people who are engaged in governance, people who take care of public order, judiciary services. The, Nobody thinks it can change its role. This is a challenge. This cannot be. Elliot Abraham said to me when we nominated Mueen Al-Barghouti, he was he was the head of the National Security Advisor. He said, he's your friend and you nominate him. If he wins, how can you pay for education, health, etc.? I'm not calling for hesitation. We have to find solutions and think not only outside the box but in a genius way as how to we can reform the PA with a security apparatus not based on the security doctrine similar to the one now. that they said we want to protect the peace process against the enemies of the peace process. The peace process has gone, yet they are attacking its enemies. So we really should reformulate the PA on new basis and respond the challenges. How can we bear the responsibility of leading the Palestinian people without the current Abu Mazen said, I said, I stand at the same distance with them. I said to them, they're ones who finance you, and they was, no, can you stand at the same distance with Iran, for example? We have to help each other to find a way out of this deep crisis and turn it into a real opportunity. First of all, I want to I want to answer when somebody asked about lack of representation of Hamas. Mr. Ahmed Ghoneim are not here as representatives. This forum is open for everyone to take part who registered. I'm sure that I know a large number of people who are in Hamas or close to Hamas, and I know a number who belong to other factions or other intellectual trends. This forum does not have any factional representation. Secondly, what Mr. Muhammad Ansari talked about is causes for concern. I appreciate that we took part in many initiatives, and what we're saying now is a repetition of what we have said at the re-establishment of the PAA, abolishing Oslo, instituting PA. This is what we've been talking about for many years now. What's important now, this is not wrong what we said, but now when we repeat it is not wrong. But to speak frankly, after the 7th of October should be different than what was before 7th of October. In the past, we had ample room to talk. Now we don't have such room. I think that if the Palestinian people, the Palestinian elites, let's set aside the factions, Palestinian elites, the Palestinian factions, regardless of their ability to influence their strength or weakness, if they do not come up with real initiatives, realistic initiatives on the ground to implement what we're talking in weeks or months, not years, I think we are faced with real dangers. Despite the greatness of what's achieved, we are facing real threats to liquidate the Palestinian cause. We should not get over enthusiastic. We should not quieten down. We are faced with a situation which requires real initiatives. The PA, nobody here on this platform is defending the PA at all. We all talked about its linkages, about its security coordination, security for peace, or whatever. We all agree on that, and nobody are hoping of change. The function of the PA is based on Oslo. How can you change it? I, I remember a lecture by Dr. Azmi. He came with the suggestion that the PA should give up on its political role. I know we have some schools, universities, and the PA should change into a municipality, some authority which provides services, and we start building the PLO, the political responsibility, its decision. The PA should be subjected to the supervision of the PLO, not the other or the other way around. Of course, we cannot hope to change the PS function. This cannot happen because they are under the occupation. Even an authority for services can and make them end up in prison because they will end up serving the Palestinian people, and the enemy doesn't want them to do so. There was a direct question that if I was to win the presidency, what would I do? Now you took us to the past. We remember the last elections in 2006. I have how, of course, I had a manifesto, a program. I'm not going to repeat it now. Otherwise, I wouldn't have nominated myself. There were three things. First of all, I would have called for immediate parliamentary elections after 3 months, and then we opened the door to form a national front to liberate ourselves from Oslo and to adopt an alternative program. This was one of. If you want more details, I can provide you with that. Of course, the second question was how can national unity be achieved? This is a very pertinent question. I think there is only one way. First of all, the principle should be a structure which contains all. But I cannot, for example, I, I cannot give a voice or a voting power to someone who has a popularity rating of 40% to one with less than 1%. So there is no escaping the fact that we should have an election which involves all the Palestinian people inside and outside and form one leadership on the question of consensus, but this should correspond to the popularity. Of course, we should hold opinion polls, maybe 10 of them, and take an average. That will clarify the picture. Those who have a weight, they should have an influence. The others have a role, but of course, this is not absolute. For this reason, elections can never be held as correct if they are held once. They should be done on regular basis because those who have a popularity of 40% can have a 20% rating next elections. And also the leadership should be representative of the opinion of the Palestinian people because the leadership now is not. I'm not asking of anyone to attack the PLO. What I'm saying is who is deciding the political line? Who consults anybody? Who who decide what to say to Blinken? Every time he comes, he gives Israel a green light. So the leadership should be representative of the Palestinian people. The third thing, will the project be a Palestinian? No, it should be bigger than that. Today we're talking about the Palestinian cause, and this has been proven globally. We should not underestimate what has happened. We remember now what Nelson Mandela, when South Africa was liberated, he said the Palestinian cause is the number one cause for humanity in this age. We must return at that. We make every liberal Arab, liberal Muslim, any liberal person in the world should think that if becomes the case, they will no longer need to have these tactics with the UK or with the US in return for something. People have thought that the battle for the national liberation is ended. Now all what they are concerned with is different positions and jobs and things. And there are some who still think that we are like the Muslims in the Battle of Uhud. Some people thought the battle was over and gave up on their positions. Is the PA can the PA be reformed? Dr. Azmi said this is this they can play a role and to provide services, but what we're talking about is the leadership role for the Palestinian people. Yes, we really need to change the paradigm to know how to deal with the new reality. Thank you very much to all our panelists. Now I ask Dr. Azmi Bshara to wrap up with some closing remarks. Good afternoon. I thank all the panelists and Dr. Leila for her moderating this session under the current circumstances. Thank you for attending this forum, this very fruitful, valuable, and useful forum, which really made us think that we do not regret holding it. In fact, we're very happy because the Palestinian problem will not be solved in this year, so we'll hold it next year. And according to all opinions here, it will not be solved soon. I hope that we will meet this time next year to discuss everything that relates to Palestine in social sciences, political sciences, like Mr. Adeeb and Mr. Ahmed has said. In fact, this is a unique forum of bringing together Palestinian academics in different disciplines to discuss matters relating to Palestine. This is what we insist on and will repeat next year. But I fear that this year will be a difficult one. We hear some optimistic voices, but personally, I see a difficult situation. Whether of the outcomes of the war on Gaza for our people in Gaza, it has never been easy. It's important to talk about the steadfastness and resilience, and I think the the outcomes will be catastrophic, and we'll have to face up to that. And I don't know how the results will be for the resistance. They are heroically, steadfastly fighting, but I don't know. This is a war. So when we're talking about the current situation in a language which is uh, which is different than what we hear about Palestinian politics, but I fear that we use terminology which may not be applicable after a year, whether to do with the Palestinian people or the strategies of the resistance in the future. This requires from us to rise up above some of the quarrels and strife which was there before, in my opinion. In my opinion, the Palestinian unity, of course, I agree with everyone which was said on assessing the current situation of the Palestinian Authority, but I think the unity is not a question, it's not a luxury, it's not just going from one capital to other to achieve reconciliation in almost a caricature way of dealing with things. This is a question of life or death to face up to the arrangements which are put in place for the coming phase. The problem is talking about Oslo or not. I agree. I agree with Oslo, and also the Israel killed Oslo off, and the resistance, and this is good that resistance participated in killing Oslo. That's good, but there is an authority, there is a security apparatus. If you confront them, you will end up in prison. Also, there is the economic side. Thousands of people have their livelihood depending on PA. It's not just a mistake we can uh, rethink, but this is part of the strategies for the struggle. Now, there are interests linked to Israel and the colonial powers. For these reasons and others I don't want to delve into, we will continue organizing these forums, and I hope we will play a role in uniting the ranks and use the voice of logic and to convince people that the question of unification is not a luxury, it's a question of life and death. I want to thank all the participants who presented their papers. This was like the backbone of the forum, and there is unanimity that the quality is higher. You know, these papers are peer reviewed. We send a call to research papers, and we received hundreds of proposals. There are elites, Palestinian elites throughout the world, and in the end, we chose the ones you hear to, and hundreds of people registered their name just to attend. We thank them too for their. Many of them came at their own expense because obviously the center cannot pay for this. We, 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 we are a research center. Our budget cannot be extended that far. Also, we thank the Institute for Palestine Studies, Mr. Khalid Farraj, and now all the organizers, all the Institute for Palestine, Ayat Hamdan, thank you to her, the Dr. Mohammed Al-Masri, the Arab Center, of course, you met him, with Maryam Al-Hawari, and many others, Mu'taz, I think you met Mu'taz. I want to thank them all, and once again, we thank you for all your contributions. We hope that, I don't know what to say. This is this is an academic conference, and we hope in the corridors there's been some networking. This is an opportunity for Palestinians to meet. I know we all appreciate that we have to make our own efforts, each from his or her position, and I'm sure there'll be many bright ideas, especially the genocide which people in Gaza are facing, and also the solidarity, and may the blessings of God be upon you all.